So today's subject, and this is one of three virtual chapter meetings this week, is going to be on digital innovation and the path forward. And just a few housekeeping things before we get started. So we have some pretty good subjects this week, and virtual obviously has been something that's impacted us, but there are a lot of opportunities, and I think you're going to find that out when you get to listen to our guest speaker today. So we're going to go ahead and do a introduction in just a moment. We'll do a one-on-one discussion. Then we're going to open it up as we would at a chapter meeting for Q&A, and then we'll do an open discussion with everybody. Just a few usual housekeeping things. When you're entering now, you're going to be muted, but you can unmute during the live Q&A session. If you have any questions during the session, you can go ahead and submit them via the Q&A tab on the bottom of the screen. And we want to stay away from any questions regarding sales, pricing, political discussions, or disparaging remarks. And we are making a recording of this webinar, which will be available after the call on the ifbta.org site. And then we do have, as I mentioned, some upcoming events this week. Big subject on ghost kitchens, which also I know our speaker today knows something about as well. But tomorrow at 1 p.m. we'll be talking about ghost kitchens, whether they're a great concept or they're haunting you. I guess also in celebration of Halloween, with Jeff Alexander, who's really a leader in this particular area, and he's president and CEO of WowBow. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a discussion at 2 p.m. ET with Don Fox, who's the CEO of Firehouse Subs, and he's a very well-known person in the industry. He leads a great organization, and we'll be talking about technology and fragmentation of the guest experience, also from the CEO perspective. So with that, let's go to the next slide. All right, so I'd like you to meet our speaker today. Clearly, Aramark is a leader in many different segments worldwide. Peter, I actually got to meet right prior to COVID, as it turns out, I think a couple of years ago at the National Retail Federation show. He is the Vice President Digital Experience and the creator of Emerge at Aramark, which really covers a lot of different things. And I want to welcome you, Peter, to a chapter meeting, a virtual chapter meeting. And I was hoping maybe we could start with you giving both an introduction to yourself, an introduction to the area you work in. And I always find out that people don't necessarily know everything that Aramark's into. So you can have the next hour and a half to go ahead and do all that.
That's right. I'll be sure to cover this in the next 67 slides. So just, sit down, people. This will be great. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing very well. It's good to see some faces. Certainly look forward to the days when, I think, Rob, when we were first together, was January 2020, and had a chance to see everyone live. So Peter Czimback, I lead, our digital innovation team, our experience team called Emerge. Emerge is a small group of, folks like myself, way too wired, way too much energy, and love and obsess over the consumer and love technology. And our real role is to really bring disruption onto ourselves. How do we really think about the consumer experience and technology's role versus today's digital labs and tech teams? Like, our tech teams support your technology. Our team, it is not about the technology. We always kind of have this idea that consumer sits at the center of what we do, and how to really evolve that. What is the role that it plays in really reinventing, and not just enhancing, but really, again, hospitality it's an old legacy industry. Someone who's been here almost 23 years, my entire career, actually. It is something that is not going to survive or grow itself unless we decide at some points there's things we're going to have to destroy and rebuild. And that's really what we focus on. What are the ways in which we can really reimagine, rethink, and undo and recreate from the digital experience? And it comes across, for those who don't know Aramark, the 19 countries that we operate in, almost 270,000 amazing people that, as I said, get up every day running to serve, as well as 2 million consumers we touch on a daily basis, even during this COVID period. Aramark covers everything across the spectrum. So from a model complexity standpoint, we have everything from elementary school students through high school and college and into the workforce, and you get sick and go to the hospital. You take a vacation at Yosemite National Park, you see us, you go watch a ball game, football game, hopefully teams better than my teams are doing. You get to see, you'll touch Aramark in some way, shape, or form, all the way down to senior living. You could make the comment that we're almost with you from the day you're born to the day you die and everywhere in between. So it is a very complex, way in which we operate. So we're not in that, while we have more points of sale than Target does, we have them in almost 25 different instances because we interact with the consumer in a very different way depending on the markets that we're in.
So, it does cover a lot of different areas. And I was just sort of curious, is there some standard definition within your organization with all those different things of where digital touches the organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we look at where we're going to, is the idea that think of digital's role as a conversation. We want to have conversations with a lot of people. We have conversations with our associates, our managers who run an account, district managers, and then our consumers, right? We have our consumer who's a patient, who's different than a consumer who's a caregiver. And you think of all of those different conversations, that have some opportunity to have a digital connectivity to them. And the way we look at it is, in the past, it was for a consumer, our digital connection to you was our cash register. That was it, right? Then the advent of digital signage and then mobile ordering, right? No longer is it that, and the focus that I have our team on is we're going to be in as many conversations as possible digitally, both with our consumers as well as our associates. Because again, if we digitize a consumer, you absolutely have to digitize your operations at the same rate, which is why as we started to do a lot more digital connections to consumers, we built things like we took all the digital tools in our associate needs, paper pull sheets, temp logs, all that stuff, training guides. It is now sits in an app on an iPad that is so simplified that literally I could grab it and go work the deli at a location tomorrow. And so by doing that, by leveraging data,
but it does make it sort of challenging for you, because also if you take a look at those people you're talking about, you have young people, you have old people. Digital probably means something different each one, and yet you have to deliver in each way. And if you just think about how you might be connecting a guest at a ball game or a student in a college and university, I don't know how you come. Is there a standard template?
No, look, to say there's anything standard in the digital world, no, gosh, no. The standard at which what you want to achieve is one thing. The way in which you go about it will be very different based on segments. From an operations perspective, connecting to our hourly associates, believe it or not, across all demographics, which, by the way, what happened in the pandemic forced digital's hand. We don't have a problem. We've seen it, different demographics, age demographics have no issue using the tool because we also learned from them and we continue to iterate. By the way, there's lesson kind of number one. The days of long drawn out development cycles should have died 20 years ago through the process of iteration and, agile, whatever you want to call it. I call it iteration, right? So those pieces, how you do it determines its success. The consumer touch points, absolutely, right? Where certain things being kind of native digital to, an application app, if you call it, fine in some markets. Definitely not fine to the college university students that is in that generation where it's, they do everything on text and voice automation, right? 2 billion text messages sent every second in this world. Most of them in the demographics, that grow up in things like that, more digital novels. They understand its role. So a native app is going to feel awkward to a college student, and it is. Based on our participation, we see it, which is why we're looking at the future of what does that need to look like to have that human connection with them.
But this wasn't something that you just did because we had a pandemic and you had to connect. This is something that you were well under the way of connecting prior to.
Yeah, conversational AI, we've been at it since 2017. We launched our first big push on it in sports in 2018, where actually Aramark brought Apple Business Chat to market as the first direct to consumer commerce tool. So we use text messaging on as customer service. We used it to get a beer a whole lot easier at a ball game because, I like beer and it should always be easier at a ball game. And we did that all the way up until the pandemic shut sports down. So we'll start to reignite that, as we look at, coming post-pandemic, how does it fit? But these are all things happening. The levels of automation we're doing with, different robotics and things of humans and robots working together wasn't a response to pandemic. It was a response to a declining market. We all know hospitality is taking an absolute beating in labor. If you looked at the macroeconomic factors and the longitudinal data, it was happening already. It was a 2018, you saw the market going down. The labor market exiting the hospitality space. So we were putting automation. Now, pandemic just made it go faster, but it was, and by the way, not that we're perfectly prepared for it, because I think what we were not really, full transparency, being really prepared for is the speed at which it accelerated.
Right.
But we were thinking through it.
Well, I just sort of, if we break this down to a number of areas, so you've mentioned labor and you mentioned, so if we focused on labor first, you were digitally connected with your staff prior to the pandemic. Would that be a good statement? Were
Yes.
you really there?
Were we? I always, I'm always maybe the one that's never really, I'm never ever satisfied. As my team knows, I believe success is the devil. So was I all the way there? No, but were we on a good path? Yes. Like we were seeing the value of the digital connectivity. The value was definitely there. The associates were building and iterating. And so, it was so much so that we had companies, we had one tech company offer to buy it from us because they wanted to package it and resell it. So we were very, we were on a great path. Were we ready that all of a sudden we would have digitally connected staff, but only 60% of them? That was something we're not, honestly, I don't think anybody was ready for.
Has that helped you in staying connected with them and then bring them back to work?
It's helping us, not come undone in an operation. I think we're, for what we're able to do, it is definitely helping us. The work we did around computer vision and self-checkout, which we started in 2016, has probably saved us from the fact that we could deploy that. We had that in 300 locations. We put several hundred more on over a certain period of time because we knew that, look, I couldn't have a cashier because I needed more people to deli. And so those technologies, which we were already at scale, really put us in a great spot to continue to do that. Is it perfect? No.
So, I really don't want to focus on the negative here. There's actually a whole slew of positive stuff here. So, first of all, with all of the data you're gathering on customers, let's put the employees aside, that must give you some sort of strategic advantage if you know how to data mine and use some artificial intelligence tools to take a look at customer preferences, no matter which segment you're in. So, do you have do you feel that you are effectively using the data that you have in front of you because you have so much data available?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think we absolutely did, and we absolutely are. The strength, I'd say we're no longer in data, we're in intelligence. And yes, okay, it's a little salesy, I know, but it's, it's early in the week. In 2018, we launched a product called Marco. And Marco, for those of you who don't know, it's exactly like IBM Watson or Cortana or Siri or any of those things. It's an AI engine that consumes things in what are called microservices. So we took, and by the way, we got this way because frankly, the chief data officer for IBM Watson came over to work for Aramark. Somebody we knew in the industry. He loved what we do. He also was a super data geek and loves that we have more data in the universe. So to him, this was like going to Disneyland. And the one thing we said is we spent time in that period freeing the data. We consumed everything. So you think of the IBM Watsons of the world and those systems, that we're all too familiar with, it is a mass consumption of data first. Then it's cleaning data, unsiloing it. And then the next thing is freeing it out. So our products, like I talked to you about, we digitized our operators, associates, and managers. That all comes through Marco. So we freed it and we put it out there and allow people to react to it. And we understood what came from it, which is, again, that now takes data, starts to become smarter. That becomes intelligence, right? And you start to put that into different services you consume more. We did that from all the way up to the pandemic. So we were ready. By the way, we even knew the things like how to shut down. When the world shut down, we knew how we could not get stuck with millions of dollars of product because we had consumed so much data. We knew how to share services to locations that were open, staff, things like that. Was I'm not going to say simple. There was a lot of work behind it. But we're able to get product to locations that needed it. Our healthcare system was still running. Our corrections business still had to keep people safe. We had things that kids were still in some colleges were still there, and some businesses had to stay running. And so we're able to do that because we understood data's value and how you can serve intelligence. So the Marco platform put us in a very good position as we entered into the pandemic and survived through it.
But I think that that's a good example of how you would use that platform to do that. But I guess I would challenge you on this, because surely Aramark must have had those kinds of plans in place before, because you could have, a severe snowstorm and shut down a airport, which you were doing. You could have games canceled and have a lot of inventory sitting there. You could have, 9/11 happen, or, some sort of threat or something, or a computer glitch, right? So you must have, I guess they were manual before, but I would think you guys would be the experts in knowing how to deal with something that shuts, because those are such big facilities. There's so much involved, right?
Well, and having, as I said, you can have all the technology in the world, to have the human know-how, is really what brings it together. Like I said, everything is about humans and automation together, not one or the other. That helped us execute. But nobody dealt with something at a scale as big as this. Shutdowns, yeah, absolutely. We've dealt with things that we should have never, wished anyone to deal with in their life. But to have all of it close, it was something like we had never seen before. You're used to it. So yes, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this at a scale of 500x, but I think having done it once or twice, to your point, or being good at it, smaller scale did certainly help us. Having the data in the right place, having the architecture of things that we do, made it very easy to spin up, 4,000 VPNs over a weekend, which wasn't that hard, to make sure our services stayed online that had to.
Yeah, I guess in all fairness, as I think about this, you really did shut down almost everything, probably except for a hospital, right?
Healthcare.
I mean, if you think about it, all your different stuff, right?
Healthcare, corrections.
Oh yeah.
There's essential businesses.
Okay, prisons as well.
Yeah, we had there's essential clients that we have that keep utilities going and things like that, and so certain things could not close. But yes, one day like that, all the stadiums were closed. Businesses were closed. Colleges sent everybody home.
So when this whole thing hit, you were already working on sort of next generation, some next things. So have you had time on your hands where you actually were able to get those things done? Do you have, like many, I'm sure, on this call, all of a sudden have a flood of funding to accelerate projects that were on the back burner? And are there some surprises that have come out of this that you say, wow, I can really take advantage of that going forward? This is a positive outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we talked about, we use computer vision for self-checkout. We've been doing it since 2016. That was never just a one and done. That was my journey of, I love computer vision from friends who worked in manufacturing. And the idea that I could take that as, I use the term, take the checkout out of checkout, because I think checkout just stinks. And so we're moving that towards fully computer vision stores, autonomous stores as they're known. Do you know our first autonomous store launch date was March 20th of 2020? Why? because we were doing it anyway. And our client was a residential housing complex that still had residents in it. And so it had to happen. We were already saw the decline in the housekeeper market for cleaning spaces. We did one of the largest cleaning robotics deployments in the industry, which, by the way, took place in April of 2020. You can't slam that together in 30 days. These were happening because we knew the industry needed it. And so a lot of things kept going because they were, by the way, the right thing to do. I wanted cleaning robotics because I want to make sure we could sanitize spaces and clean them. And I want to keep my people safe and our customers safe. So we did those things. The autonomous store was people needed to get something. So we want to make sure they could when there's so much fear of going out. So it definitely accelerated it. Did we get an increased budget during this time to do more? Heck no. We work in the hospitality industry. We had to survive a bit. But what I think we showed the industry, especially the tech space, is that we kind of saw that, look, forget the pandemic for a second, being more digitally connected to a consumer, having more greater moments to engage with them, using automation to free people up to have that extra moment to say, hi, how are you? It all made sense. It's just the pandemic became less about, the sense of it and more the necessity of it.
So I'm looking at, and we're not turning on the mic yet, but I am looking at who's on this call, and I realize we have people on this call from various segments in here of things. So I'm curious. Aramark didn't know at all. So are there some things that you actually saw other people doing out there? Because hotels, retail, different segments, of hospitality where that you said, wow, they're really onto this, and that you're actually picking something up from one of the other segments or one of the other operators out there that you're now putting to use?
To say specific things landing on my plate, give me a second. I'm sure I will come up with something. I am, for me, myself, by the way, as you see, I'm not even in my office. I am a human obsessed with, humans and what they do. So I spend, one of those people where I think my company and my CIO would rather me be in the office a little bit more. I don't like it. I love being out here watching how people behave. I love going and see what restaurant chains do and concepts do. The thing you mentioned earlier about ghost kitchens, and some of the things that, they're doing over, with as it relates to ghost kitchens. There's so much that's out there that you can see that consumers are doing and that the businesses are doing that are just amazing to learn from. And so could I point to some things? I think the way, I say one thing I actually love, we actually do in our healthcare space, is I loved what hotels were doing around what they use as tugs for luggage delivery, which they were doing pre-COVID. When you think about it, the things that we now use that for, for deliver meals, because it was some pretty impressive things that you could use that technology for. So I think the hotel industry has done some pretty fun stuff that I like, and that I see that they're doing. I think the ghost kitchen idea, look, let's be honest. The whole putting wings out the back door of, your Chili's, freaking magic. And by the way, as someone who may consume a chicken wing or two in my day, I think
we may have some people on this call who know something about that one very personally in this. And by the way, I'm in Boston at a hotel conference right now, and the number one thing they brought up that they're all looking at is ghost kitchens, which is sort of a great subject for later this week, right?
Yeah,
but let me ask you this.
That piece has caught us. Oh, sorry. Your point. That the ghost kitchen idea is one we had thought about. I think it's one we, accelerated. We did some things. I can't say specifically where, but look, that became we had all these assets. College students are not there, but you have enormous kitchens. They're doing this thing. Let's make value out of them. Some of our best locations, for where employees actually live, we knew they live within close proximity, and the clients cared about their employees getting fed. We opened it up. We turned it into the ghost kitchen idea. I think that whole idea of you can create very fun, unique, iterations of concepts to me, such a cool idea. I mean, because if it doesn't work, you're not out of, like, you didn't spend all this money on trade dress and a location look and feel and seats. I mean, you put something on an app. That stuff, it takes 20 minutes. I can do that for you guys before this conference call's over. And if it doesn't work, just change it up. Like, what a great idea for businesses to just get creative and have fun. Yeah.
So one of our people who are on the call from the hotel industry actually asked a question about innovation in the college and university space. And I suppose if you want to think of it this way, if you're feeding dormitories and you're doing things like that, it's very similar in some respects to people who are staying in a hotel that you need to feed, and there's catering and there's a bunch of things in there. Is there a tech facet that students demand and expect today that people should be thinking ahead now in the hotel industry? And I'm going to just take a little license on that one. As we look at hotel brands, really trying to also produce some brands that are very hip and for the younger traveler, are there things that should be incorporated in there that you may have learned from the university environment?
Yeah, I think, Rob, you just kind of said it's a great point. Think about, the days of the hotel. Used to be, it's like, I get a burger and I get a pizza and I get some, a steak that I pretty much don't want. The disruption of the Grubhubs and Ubers and DoorDashes really said, okay, we can't be like this anymore, but you still have kitchens, you still have spaces you can use. I think the coolest thing that we have seen, and I think that higher education space has gravitated to, is the diversity of menu, right? That you can do the ghost kitchen idea, that we can get exploratory, by the way. I mean, we can try, the Pete's barbecue. And if it doesn't work, by the way, we didn't lose much, but we did find out, with the right vehicles of digital communication, what they did want. And so I think those pieces, when you think about the hotel industry, you still have kitchens. They're still valuable. It's asset utilization. The part around ghost kitchens is, I've sung the song throughout the organization, is just try. It's a very low risk miss if you miss, because you just change it. But I think that, the consumers coming up into the workforce are going to expect it. The standard try to cover a lot of bases is not going to help you. The college student is allowed to expand, right? I mean, even one thing we're working on is, how do we rethink the meal plan for good so that a student can go into the local community, which they can. It's just hard to do it on, I say to my daughter, hard to do it on daddy's money.
But didn't Aramark have a initiative going to connect the restaurants in the local community onto the meal plans and things as well? And perhaps going a step further on that, you may have, assuming that students were coming to school, may be able to greatly help those people, but that might be at a cost of downsizing some of the huge and expansive kitchens and things that you have going on, in some of the venues that you have.
Well, we did a couple things, and this is something I will say, as I'm up here in New York, and something we've done throughout the country in our business and dining industry space, is that, look, a lot of restaurants suffered and people lost their restaurants, and I will say, while one of our competitors are still talking about celebrity chefs and things like that, we always have this love, and we created a whole concept around local restaurants. It's called Local Restaurant Row, where we invite local restaurants to come in. We were doing something even further to say, look, a lot of the things we're doing is we're bringing up, we searched social media and a lot of digital channels and found the local person that lost their restaurant, that made good, whatever, Thai food. And we're bringing them into our spaces and letting them have a chance to, hey, get the food from this person locally that you love, support the local restaurants, and support this person who's trying to build their business back. It's one of the things that, quite honestly, led to some pretty significant growth for us, because we shifted the story around, we're going to utilize spaces to get people who lost their restaurant back up, give them those opportunities. We've always supported the higher ed space. Yes, we would bring restaurants in and tie them into meal plans. I think we can go even bigger. It's a very big technology play. For those that don't know, kid gets a meal plan and they can spend money on in certain places, because it's what's called a closed loop credit card. But there are ways to create open loop credit cards, like your debit credit card you have today, but still confine them to certain spaces. It's a massive lift. It's telling a legacy industry like higher education to do something they never thought they've ever done before. And as someone who's sat in the board of university, it's a little hard sometimes to tell, higher ed that they need to change. But there is opportunities to do that. We're big on the local restaurant, bringing them into the space,
but you
getting
also
them built.
Right. But you also can learn from higher ed and the student population, because they're going to be the forefront of different things digitally, how they want to connect to things. I want to just change the subject slightly here. We had somebody who brought up again the workers, which is obviously a huge issue right now. I'm curious because I'm going to guess that Aramark hires, besides a lot of full-time workers, you hire a lot of part-time workers too in certain things that you do. And I'm curious as to whether the digital technologies for gig workers is something that you can take advantage of. Is it an advantage to you? And is it a way to source more people because you use a lot of part-time labor and gig type of labor? By the way, things that they want to be at, like a ball game, right? Versus some of the other industries.
Yeah, no, we actually, so again, pre-pandemic, we used technology to engage the workers that we had. Because to your point, like you work, we have people who love to work a ball game. It's super fun. You get to work, you get to see a ball game. People are usually in a good mood, for the most part. But then you're done, right? It's not a full-time job, but the complexity and diversity of our business, we never let them realize that, hey, there could be XYZ school down the street, a business. And so we leverage, technology that allows us to crowdsource, right? So the idea that you could work and we can open up shift sharing opportunities to say, hey, you do grill over here. Do you want to work a grill over here to help fill shifts? By the way, proved absolutely essential during the pandemic, so that those were working, we could try to get as much as many opportunities for them to stay on board with us as possible, because it was hard to find shifts. So we used that pre-pandemic to really kind of, again, the market with this was happening anyway, right? To kind of keep people engaged. We actually then used that to then, during the pandemic to keep people as full as possible. And as, by the way, we figured out we could expand, we expanded it more people, because our goal was always to bring back as many as we could. That was number one. So we absolutely use that technology, those shift sharing things. Look, it happens anyway. I say, give the example of my daughter works at a small bakery in the town we live in Texas. They do shift sharing technology today. You just know it as a group chat. It's already done. But if you can do it with structure that can get them to make sure you get the right person, the right role, because that's most important, right? The right skill set. Don't want to hire the person that cleans floors to say, come work the grill. But if you can put those right skill sets in place, then you can actually get more efficient use out of the labor that you have.
Well, our industry has talked for a while about having certifications in certain types of, not like the IFPTA's technology certification, but certification in certain types of operational positions where you could, in fact, be able to get gig workers in a certain area. Before we go to, so we're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to just do open mic discussion like we normally do. But before we go to the Q&A, I did have one other question for you. They're really the four areas I think we've talked, that's four, not five. They're really the four areas that we've talked about, which was the consumer or the guest, we got that. The employee, we got that. Operations. But actually, you actually probably have two others, clients, your clients themselves and the suppliers. And I just thought, maybe we wrap up this side of it by talking about how you are digitally connected with both the suppliers and the clients. And perhaps you might want to just explain the client part real quick, because not everybody might be on top of that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For those that maybe are not familiar with Aramark. So if you think, I was mentioning, like, we serve college students and businesses and things like that. So imagine Nike's headquarters, that we serve food in. Well, Nike is our client. So there's a team inside of Nike that we would report to, that we would, talk about what we're going to do for amenities and food and things like that. A hospital, Baylor Scott and White, University of Florida. Those are what we, clients that we have in there. So there's the consumers, and then there's the group you report to, which is something we focus on. And of course, to your point, our vendor partners, Cisco Foods, Pepsi's, all the way down to the local farm down the street that we buy from, or, again, restaurant partners, et cetera. And when I talked about, this idea of you can digitize the consumer, but you have to digitize your operation at the same rate, you also have to digitize your clients and you have to digitize your partners, because it is, again, if you put not enough weight on one area of it, well, it will fall. The parts of, God love Starbucks, but I always tell people one of my favorite stories of Starbucks, and I have a friend who works there, so I get to pick on him a little bit. They did great work with their mobile app, and they did a lot of things around that, but they never changed the store design or the digitization of their store. So then you all remember, because everybody was that one person one time where you butted through everybody in line waiting to get your coffee. That's because you over digitized one versus the other. And you've got to think about that. Again, if I put so much weight on being as many conversations with consumers as possible, but I don't have our operational tool, we're going to run out of food. We're going to be slow to be ready. We're not going to be ready at the times we may need to. The same thing with a client. Our client, we may need them to say, hey, we need to build, I'll simplify, we need to build a new food concept because the density of population over here is getting greater and greater, and they're all clamoring for, pizza. They need to know why. So you need to have those digital tools, that intelligence free to them to say, here's what's going on. Here's what your consumers, your employees, your associates, your customers, this is what they like. This is what they don't like. This is how they feel about the business. And this is what we can see as the future outlook. Digitizing them makes it easy conversation. So we're now not sitting going, let me explain to you what's going on. They see what's going on. So now we're into how do we address it? It becomes and again, at the speed at which consumers are moving, which pandemic made it move faster. And I will say, I think the hospitality retail space continues to lag the demand of the consumer. It's by doing those things, you allow yourself to pick up some speed, because you lose the speed as you're educating. They're still moving, right? The distance becomes greater. You do that, it helps. Our partners, we owe them the opportunity to say, hey, this is what you should know about us, because we create those opportunities to buy smarter, buy different, know what, help them understand how they can be more effective so they can be more effective for us. It doesn't make sense to hide data from them when you can tell them, hey, look, nobody likes your chicken. I'm making that up. But you can tell them why. You can show them where it does work, right? And the opportunities and what it does, because it helps your positioning in terms of distribution. It helps us be more sustainable as a company, be good stewards, to society. And also, again, having those good partnerships helps us to be good stewards to our client. We buy better, we buy smarter, things like that. So it's always everything you do is, just real quickly, the thing I'll tell you is, think about the people you touch, the stakeholders you touch. Do you have a digital connection to them? Is the point. I'll kind of to wrap that up and bring context back to you all.
Right, but not every partner, especially when you're working in certain areas where they want to work with smaller independents or local companies, are going to be as technologically savvy, as Aramark is. And yet you need to help them with that. They need to be connected, and especially if they're going to help operate or train. So it just creates
more so than you think, though. I think the thing is, don't underestimate small business of the things that they can do. Yes, will they have
certainly
an ERP system?
Certainly not anymore, because if they weren't in the tech before, they certainly are now, right? So
they just found easy ways through it.
And I want to thank everyone for participating today. I do want to remind you that Ghost Kitchens is going to be tomorrow at 1 p.m. East, and then Technology Fragmentation, which I see Rob Jacoby's on this call, so I'm sure he will be on that one, at 2 p.m. on Thursday. But also, I want to make sure that you're aware that we will be doing some speed dating coming up, and there's a survey that you can fill out at ifbta.org/connections, which will help to pair you up with some people on different subjects and things that you might want to talk about. So you should fill out that survey, and then you'll stay tuned for more information. And with that, I do want to thank everyone for joining today. I do remind you this is recorded for our members. out there, and it will be posted for our members. And Peter, thank you very much. And I know you're in New York, and you sort of
thank you all.
came on, in the middle of a number of things. So thank you, everyone, and we will talk again tomorrow.